Hey guys, tonight we're heading somewhere very dry and very ancient. You know the Sahara, right? That massive, sun-blasted ocean of sand, wind, and mirages? Yeah, that one. But tonight, we're not trudging through dunes. Not yet, anyway. Tonight, you step barefoot into soft, dew-wet grass. The night air hums with frogs and insects. To your left, a distant thunderstorm flashes purple over a horizon lined with trees. Fireflies blink in your periphery, and you hear the grunt of something heavy splashing in a nearby river. You're not in some dreamlike version of the Amazon. You're in the Sahara, and it's alive. Welcome to the Green Sahara time, when what's now endless desert was full of lakes, rivers, forests, and, yes, hippos. Lots of them. Swimming, wallowing, grunting hippos. It's strange, almost backwards, like walking into your bathroom and finding a koi pond where the sink used to be. But it was real, and it wasn't that long ago. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're watching from, and what time it is you falling asleep in Brooklyn or waking up in Kuala Lumpur. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You move through high grass, brushing your fingertips along stems that tickle and sway. The moon overhead filters through wide acacia trees, lighting up the trail ahead. There's no GPS, no signs, but somehow your feet know the way. You pass a herd of ancient elephants stockier than today's versions, their tusks long and curved like oversized sabers. They grunt as you pass, flapping their ears lazily, as if saying, "Don't worry, we've been here for millennia." Hard to believe, but this Sahara lush, living Eden, existed just a few thousand years ago. Scientists call it the African humid period, which honestly sounds like a steamy vacation package. But it was a time when shifting planetary rhythms triggered a makeover of North Africa. The result? A place that was wetter, greener, and frankly much more relaxing than the modern scorched version. This wasn't a random rainy season. We're talking centuries of rainfall, turning dunes into wetlands and carving massive rivers across the land. Picture Lake Victoria level bodies of water where today there's nothing but mirage and camel spit. It's still debated exactly when this all began. Historians and climate scientists love arguing about this stuff. Some say it started around 0 years ago. Others put the real green burst closer to 0 years ago. Either way, you'd need a canoe instead of a camel. You pass beneath a rocky cliff now, its sides painted with figures long-necked giraffes, archers mid-stride, and oddly buoyant humans with limbs akimbo. These aren't modern murals. They were carved and painted by ancient Saharan people. The most famous are at a place charmingly known as the Cave of the Swimmers. There, ghostly images show humans apparently doing the backstroke, suspended in an eternal float. Scientists still argue whether they're really swimming or just levitating in some prehistoric dream sequence. Either way, the water was definitely there. And speaking of prehistoric swimming, let's get back to our hippo friends. You crouch by a wide bend in the river. The moon reflects off the surface, silver and calm, until it ripples first gently, then violently, as something massive surfaces with a puff of air. One eye opens, then another. There's a grunt and a splash and a sudden awareness that you are not the biggest thing in this jungle. Hippos in the Sahara? Absolutely. Fossils have been found all across the region, from Mauritania to Libya, proving these snorting beasts once roamed where today not even a lizard wants to sunbathe. Their bones lie hidden beneath layers of wind-blown sand, like guests who overstayed their welcome and got buried in the couch cushions. Back on your stroll, you sidestep a trail of flattened grass, probably a path made by migrating antelope. You pause to smell the air. It's thick with moisture, like someone left the world's humidifier on high. You can almost taste the pollen and distant rain. A soft breeze tickles your neck, and for a moment, it feels like walking through a greenhouse built by forgotten gods. But don't get too cozy. There are insects the size of your thumb here, and frogs with voices like chainsaws. And somewhere, off in the trees, you hear a lion's cough spee, dry, like a smoker waking up. This may be paradise, but it still comes with teeth. You reach the edge of a wide lake, its shoreline dotted with footprints, some human, some not. You can't help but imagine the people who once lived here, waking to bird calls and the slow grunt of nearby animals. No air conditioning, no alarm clocks, just the rhythm of water and light. By the way, if you're wondering how this all turned into sand again, don't worry, we'll get there. For now, just enjoy the breeze, the green, and the utterly baffling idea that where you're standing today, one of the driest, most hostile regions on Earth haunts, hosted hippos, humans, and a whole lot of splashing. But that's always the twist in these sleepy little histories, isn't it? Nothing stays the same for long. Planets wobble, weather shifts, and before you know it, the lush becomes dust. For now, though, rest your feet. There's still a long walk ahead. You rise from the lake's edge and start following a path marked not by signs or fences, but by the rhythm of the land itself. The grass bends differently here. Faint trails left by generations of feet, both human and hoofed. You're not alone. You never have been. Somewhere nearby, you hear distant drumming, soft, rhythmic, like a heartbeat muffled by foliage. Maybe it's thunder, maybe it's someone cooking over an open fire. Either way, your pace slows, lulled by the gentle pulse of a landscape that breathes. And now, let's meet the people who once called this green Sahara home. They're not famous names from your school textbooks. No pyramids yet, no pharaohs strutting around in gold sandals. These were early pastoralists and foragers, small communities who figured out how to survive and thrive among lakes and wetlands. You pass a cluster of huts made from reeds and mud, their roofs thatched with tall grasses. Smoke curls lazily from one, and you hear children laughing, those high, chaotic giggles that mean someone probably got tackled into the river. These people had boats carved from tree trunks, nets woven from plant fibers, and dogs who trotted along beside them like sleepy bodyguards. There's a woman grinding grain between two smooth stones. She glances up at you and nods, not surprised to see you here. In this version of history, you're expected. You belong. Archaeologists call them the Kiphians and the Tenerians, cultures that thrived in this once green desert around 8,000 to 5,000 years ago. They lived near what we now call Gobero, in present-day Niger. The area is dry and dusty today, but dig just a little, and you'll find graves, tools, pottery, even skeletons with limbs folded neatly like they just lay down for a nap. And some of them weren't small. Kiphians, in particular, were unusually tallsome, over 6 feet, broad-shouldered and strong, like ancient basketball players who also hunted hippos for dinner. Their bones suggest a diet rich in fish and meat, not the malnourished frame we often expect from primitive people. One archaeologist described them as robust. That's polite scientist. Speak for, they could snap you like a twig. You duck under a tree where fish bones dangle like ornaments. The air smells like roasted catfish and damp clay. It's easy to forget that this is the Sahara. You half expect a jungle parrot to squawk hello. Now, about those burial grounds. At Gobero, researchers uncovered a grave that still gives them goosebumps, a woman lying on her side, her arms stretched protectively around 2 children. The family had been buried together, facing one another, as if frozen in a final embrace. Some of the grave goods included decorative shells from faraway coasts, suggesting trade, connection, maybe even style preferences. Shell accessories are so 6000 BCE. There's a gentleness here you didn't expect, not just survival, but affection. People weren't just eking out a living, they were building families, honoring their dead, and painting their stories on stone. One wall shows a line of cattle, another a person in a ritual pose, arms raised like antennas toward the stars. Historians still argue whether these societies were fully nomadic or semi-settled. Some say they followed seasonal rains, others think they had more permanent homes. But what's clear is that they adapted beautifully to their lush surroundings. No temples, no tax records, but a way of life that worked and worked well. And they weren't alone. The Sahara wasn't one empty space. It was stitched together with rivers, lakes, forests, and communities that probably exchanged tools, tales, and the occasional jealous side-eye over whose goats were fatter. Cultures may not have had borders, but they had rhythm sand. Those rhythms echoed through drums, footsteps, and the hooves of cattle with long, elegant horns. You walk through a gathering now. Women are braiding hair beneath a tree, the strands stretched and woven like fabric. A man is painting symbols on a rock, his hands steady, his breath slow. There's music flutes made from reeds, soft and airy like wind whispering through bone. And there's laughter, always laughter. Even in ancient times, someone was probably telling jokes about fish that got away or goats with personality disorders. You sit down next to a young boy carving a small animal from wood. He hands it to you, shy but proud. It's a hippo. You smile. He grins. Somewhere behind you, someone drops a clay pot, and everyone groans in the universal language of, "Oh no, not again." You stay a moment longer, watching firelight dance on faces so alive, so present, it's hard to believe they're long gone. But that's the thing about the past that lingers in every grain of sand, every ancient fossil, every whisper of wind through stone. And as you finally stand and begin walking again, you realize the ground beneath your feet isn't just dirt, it's memory. Soft, green, living memory. You follow a trail of sun-warmed stones, the kind that almost hum beneath your soles alive with the ancient touch of a world that used to bloom here. Around you, the terrain opens into what looks like an endless savanna. Tall grass sways in slow motion, and in the near distance, you spot something both oddly familiar and entirely out of place. Herds of animals you thought belonged to documentaries about Kenya or Tanzania, not the Sahara. Giraffes, yes, long-necked silhouettes nibbling leaves from sparse acacia trees, and elephants, surprisingly shaggy, their tusks exaggerated into graceful arcs. Even ostriches, strutting as if auditioning for a slow-motion shampoo commercial. Yes, you're still in the Sahara, or at least the version of it that existed thousands of years ago, during the African humid period. That was roughly 10 to 50 years ago, when monsoon rains shifted northward due to changes in Earth's orbit. Scientists call it the Green Sahara, though let's be honest, hippo jungle would have been catchier. And right there, wallowing in a muddy watering hole, is a pod of hippos. Huge, lazy, loud. You hear them grunt and bellow, the sound deep enough to tickle your ribs. One opens its mouth in a massive yawn knot, unlike yours at this point, and you realize just how vibrant and chaotic this region once was. Now, here's the kicker. This isn't just speculative imagination. There's actual rock art, ancient graffiti, if you will, drawn by people who witnessed all of this firsthand. You come across one of those stone walls now warm from the sun and weathered just enough to make you squint. Figures emerge as your eyes adjust. Hunters with bows drawn, their limbs stick, thin but poised with purpose. Antelopes dash across the surface in reddish pigments. And yes, there's a hippo too, wide-eyed and slightly cartoonish. Honestly, it looks a bit like someone's attempt at drawing their mother-in-law. These aren't just pretty pictures, they're time machines. They tell us what animals roamed here, how humans interacted with them, and maybe even what jokes they shared around the fire. Historians still debate whether these illustrations were spiritual, artistic, or just, "look what I saw today" diaries. But the detail in them is astonishing, right down to how the animals moved. And now you crouch beside another drawing, a man holding something long and oddly shaped. It could be a harpoon, or maybe a musical instrument. There's no label, no museum plaque, just speculation and imagination. That's half the fun. You walk on. The grass is thinning slightly now, giving way to a more open landscape. There's a smell in the air sharp, clean, the kind that follows a summer storm. Even in this dreamlike version of the past, weather still matters. You reach a rise, and below you stretches what was once Lake Megachodius. That's its real name. Sounds like the nickname of your college roommate who refused to wear shoes, but no. This was an actual freshwater lake, possibly the largest in Earth's history. At its peak, it could have covered an area larger than modern-day Germany. Germany! Let that sink in because it certainly did. Lake Megachod is mostly gone now, reduced to fragments like Lake Chad. But back then, It would have glittered under the sun like a misplaced ocean, bordered by marshes, reeds, and of course hippos. Picture the scene. Children paddling crude canoes, parents mending nets, fish sizzling over open fires. You sit by one of those fires now, your fingers warmed as dusk falls over this ancient oasis. And guess what? You're not even the only visitor. Ancient crocodiles once patrolled these waters, some of them growing as long as buses. Fossils found nearby suggest a species of supercrocs once lurked in the reeds. Yes, that's real. And yes, you're now reconsidering your decision to dip your toes in the lake. The people here adapted beautifully. They knew how to fish, farm, and fend off oversized reptiles. Some archaeologists believe they even built floating villages clusters of huts lashed together, bobbing gently like lily pads. Others suggest elaborate irrigation systems, using hand-dug channels to trap and redirect water during the dry spells. Historians still argue whether these were seasonal camps or permanent settlements, but no one denies their ingenuity. You lean back, the sound of frogs croaking in chorus around you, and imagine waking each morning to a green sunrise over Megachad's mirrored surface. No honking cars, no emails, no alarm clocks, just birds, bugs, and a bowl of roasted millet. Delicious, crunchy millet, like ancient cereal with none of the guilt. The idea of the Sahara as a dynamic, ever-changing place might feel strange. We tend to imagine deserts as static, eternal dry forever. But this region has cycled between arid and lush many times over the past few 100,000 years. The Green Sahara wasn't a one-time miracle. It was part of Earth's natural rhythm. And speaking of rhythm, someone near the lake starts drumming. The sound carries across the water like a heartbeat. You listen. One beat, pause, two beats. It's steady, calming, almost like it knows you're here to sleep. You close your eyes for a moment, lulled by the symphony of hippos grunting, frogs croaking, and ancient drums thudding like a lullaby through time. You wake, or maybe you never quite left, and the sound of that ancient drumming fades into the hush of wind sweeping over tall grass. The scent of wet earth lingers, and for a moment, it's hard to believe this place would ever become a desert. But now, your feet take you farther inland, away from the Great Lake, and deeper into the lives of the people who once called this lush Sahara home. They weren't just surviving, they were thriving. You pass through what might have once been a village, low huts made of mud and thatch, arranged in tidy circles like a family huddled together for warmth. There's a rhythm here, not just in the way things were built, but in the way people lived. You can almost hear the murmur of conversation, the scrape of grinding stones, the giggle of children chasing chickens. In your hand, you find a fragment of pottery. It's red, rough, and hand-shaped. There's a pattern etched into its simple, wavy lines that look like water. Historians still argue whether these markings were decorative or symbolic, but either way, someone took time to carve them. Time, energy, and care for. A bowl. That's love, really. Pottery might sound boring to you, but don't underestimate it. Archaeologists adore pottery. It doesn't rot. It doesn't vanish. And it tells stories long after the people who used it are dust. The kind of clay, the way it was fired, the shape each piece is a puzzle. From pots, we learn about trade, migration, and diet. For instance, some of the pots here show traces of dairy fats, suggesting early herders may have domesticated animals and, yes, made cheese. Cheese in the Sahara. Let that melt in your mouth for a second. You stroll past another set of huts, this one with a fence of sticks, possibly to keep livestock in, or something more mysterious out. The Sahara's early inhabitants weren't isolated either. Rock art in nearby areas shows horses pulling chariots, which hints at contact with northern African cultures. And not just that, some symbols match those found as far away as the Nile Valley, suggesting trade, migration, or at least a very enthusiastic game of long-distance charades. A woman appears in your mind's eye now, kneeling by a fire. She's stirring something in a clay pot, humming softly. Her hair is braided. Her bracelets clink gently when she moves. She could be your great-great-grandmother or your neighbor. There's something universal in her motions. Nurture, repetition, calm. You step inside her hut. It smells like ash, herbs, and warm earth. A sleeping mat lies in the corner. On a shelf, a bundle of dried leaves, perhaps medicine, and tucked beneath the mat something small, shiny, and unexpected. A bead made from shell. The nearest ocean is hundreds of miles away. So, how did that bead get here? Trade routes. The Green Sahara wasn't just a place to live, it was a crossroads. Nomadic groups and settled communities alike bartered, shared knowledge, and swapped goods across the growing continent. Historians still argue whether these were early forms of international diplomacy or just folks who liked shiny things. But either way, it paints a picture of remarkable connectivity. Imagine the conversations around those trades. I'll give you 2 jars of goat milk if you throw in that blue stone. Or maybe something a little more poetic. My daughter will wear your shell at her wedding and will remember your people in the dance. Of course, it wasn't all peace and pottery. Some cave paintings depict warriors, men on horseback chasing each other with spears, conflict, even here. Maybe over water, maybe over pride. You crouch beside one of these paintings now, noticing a curious detail. The horses have decorative tassels hanging from their bridles. War, yes, but stylish. Your path leads onward through fields of ancient grains, wild millet, sorghum, and barley. The stalks tickle your arms. You pluck a few grains and taste them, and they're surprisingly sweet. This is where agriculture took root, slowly and patiently. People didn't abandon hunting entirely, but they began to rely more on what they could grow, a quiet revolution of roots and patience. Suddenly, the wind shifts and the air grows cooler. A shadow passes overhead a cloud, maybe, or something more ominous. You look up, the sky is darkening, and the grasses are swaying harder. A distant rumble sounds not thunder, but change. The Green Sahara, for all its splendor, was never permanent. It was always living on borrowed time, balanced on Earth's shifting axis, and the ever-fickle orbit that brought the rains. Those same monsoons that had blessed the land began to retreat. The rain faded, slowly, cruelly. It didn't happen overnight. No apocalypse, no flash flood, or single disastrous event. Just a slow withering. Year by year, generation by generation, springs ran dry, lakes shrank into puddles, crops failed more often, livestock thinned, and people began to leave. You see them now, trudging with bundles on their backs, children clinging to skirts, oxen dragging crude carts, whole communities pulling up roots and following the whispers of water southward, eastward, anywhere but here. You follow them too, not out of fear, but curiosity. What did they know? Where did they go? Some ended up near the Nile, blending into the cultures that would later birth Egypt's golden age. Others moved into sub-Saharan regions, influencing the early foundations of West African kingdoms. The Sahara didn't die, it scattered, like a broken jar whose pieces seeded stories across a continent. As the sun sets behind you, the grasses shimmer gold one last time. You stand at the edge of what will become the desert, and the wind carries the dry breath of what's to come. Sand, silence, time. But for now, the memory of this place clings to you. You turn once more, looking back. The hippos are gone. The lake is a mirage. But beneath your feet, beneath the sand that will soon cover it all, lies a green past that refuses to be forgotten. The sun dips low, and the first hints of gold fade into a softer, pinker hush. You press forward, toes sinking just slightly into soil that's still stubbornly green, though you feel it changing beneath you. The path leads through a region not quite desert, and not quite forest, something in between. A transition zone, much like the lives of the people who once lived here. You've stepped into the twilight of the Green Sahara. This part of the journey is quieter. Fewer birdsong bursts from the trees. The breeze is thinner, drier, and your skin begins to feel the first brushes of dust. But here, in this in-between space, you find perhaps the most fascinating stories of all, not ones about grandeur or glory, but about adjustment. The slow, sleepy shift of life reshaping itself to fit a new mold. You spot them before you hear them, clusters of people huddled near a shrinking river. These are not the lakeside dwellers you saw earlier, painting hippos and crafting ornaments. These are their descendants. Leaner, tougher, more weathered, their clothes are simpler, their tools more efficient. They've shed the luxuries of a wetter world. Now, everything is purposeful. You crouch by the river and dip a hand into the water. It's warm, shallow, barely enough to ripple. A boy splashes nearby, cupping water with a broken gourd. His mother calls him in a language you don't understand but recognize anyway. There's worry in her tone. Maybe the water level is lower than it should be. Maybe the elders are whispering about leaving. You overhear bits of conversation as you drift from camp to camp. There's talk of new stars appearing in the sky, not actual stars, mind you, but travelers. Nomads who've arrived from far-off places, bringing strange goats and salt blocks wrapped in cloth. One man speaks of a land where the river runs backwards, an early tale of the Nile, perhaps. This region, the Sahel, is becoming a corridor, a place of movement. People are exchanging not just goods, but beliefs, skills, and languages. A woman teaches others how to braid stronger rope. An elder tells stories around the fire, stories about the ancestors who used to ride across green plains chasing ostriches, stories about the time the rain forgot them. You listen in, and you start to notice something peculiar. The stories have changed. They're no longer about what is there, about what was. Nostalgia has crept in like dust through the seams of a tent. Historians still argue whether this nostalgia shaped later African mythologies, but the echoes are unmistakable. A paradise lost, a golden age of rivers and trees. And then, laughter. You turn and see a group of teenagers racing across the cracked soil, tossing dried seed pods like frisbees. For a second, the heaviness lifts. Even as the environment becomes harsher, people are still inventing games, still teasing each other, still falling in love under the stars. The human spirit doesn't dry up quite so easily. Night falls fully now, and you find yourself among tents, sitting beside a fire. The smell of roasted millet wafts through the air. Someone passes you a bowl porridge, thick and smoky. You eat in silence, listening to an old man recite a tale about a rain spirit who weeps only once every 10 years. When she does, he says, the rivers swell, the trees bloom, and the hippos return. He smiles as he speaks, but his eyes betray doubt. Across the fire, a young girl stares into the flames. She isn't listening. She's sketching something in the dirt with a stick-a map, maybe. It leads east, or maybe south. You lean closer and see that she's drawn a river, flanked by huts and fields. A new home, a dream, hard to tell. But she's clearly imagining something beyond this place. And in that moment, you realize what you're witnessing isn't the end of the Green Sahara. It's the beginning of its memory. You walk away from the firelight and into the cooler night air. The stars blaze overhead, and for a while, you lie down and just breathe. The ground is still soft here, still has life. But for how much longer? That question haunts you a little, but only a little. Because even as this world fades, the people are adapting. They're not giving up, they're reconfiguring. And isn't that what humans do best? Take, for example, the invention of desert dwellings. Some of these groups learned to build domed shelters using little more than branches, hide, and mud. Not luxurious, but portable, breathable, and oddly elegant. One of the huts you pass by even has a small decorative wind chime made from snail shells and bone. It tinkles faintly in the breeze, a soft lullaby for this changing land. You pass by another mural painted on a boulder, faded almost to invisibility. It shows two figures holding hands, one standing in a field of grass, the other surrounded by sand. A farewell? A metaphor? Historians still argue, but to you it looks like a bridge between worlds. Before the Green Sahara dries out completely, it leaves behind fingerprints and stones, on bones, on hearts, and those who move on take pieces of it with them. They won't remember every detail. The names will blur, the river will become a myth, the hippos will become a symbol. But the idea of this place, of a fertile land that once cradled life in the middle of what would become the world's largest desert, that idea will endure. You roll over and close your eyes. The fire crackles in the distance. The wind stirs the tall grass one last time. And somewhere, deep beneath the future dunes, a single clay pot waits patiently for the world to rediscover it. The morning comes not with birdsong, but with windry, persistent, and whispering secrets through the brush. You rise slowly, brushing off a thin coat of dust that settled on you overnight. The fire is nothing but cold ash now. The travelers you met the night before have already moved on, their footprints a fading trail toward the south. You follow a different path, one that veers east. The trees thin out even more, and the grass becomes patchy, clinging to the earth in desperate tufts. The transition is nearly complete. You are no longer in a green Sahara. You are in a space that is learning how to forget what it once was. And yet every few miles, something strange interrupts the monotony. A stone ring, a cracked basin, a fragment of pottery decorated with spirals. They don't belong to the desert. They belong to water, to life, to people who once built homes and dug wells and sang lullabies to the night. You're walking across the scattered remnants of entire civilizations. Not grand empires. Mind you, no marble palaces or golden thrones. These were quiet, humble societies. Farmers, herders, dreamers with clay in their hands. Historians still debate whether these early cultures had written language. No clear script has been found, but some argue that the carvings on bone and rock may have carried meanings beyond art perhaps. Family records or agricultural logs, or maybe shopping lists. Who knows? You imagine some ancient teenager being scolded for etching jokes into sacred stone. The wind sharpens, and with it, a low, hollow sound. You turn your head, following it, and discover a strange sight. A long, narrow trench cutting across the land. It's man-made, obviously. A former irrigation canal, perhaps. One that used to carry water from a now-vanished lake to fields long swallowed by sand. You sit by the trench and run your fingers through the fine silt. It's cool, surprisingly. There's a ghost of moisture still trapped beneath the surface, just enough to convince you that something once lived here. Something that had no intention of disappearing. Further along your path, you come across a skeleton. Not human, thankfully, though, that might have made for a more dramatic twist. No, this is the ribcage of a long-dead cattle beast. Probably one of the Aurochs' massive, hulking ancestors of modern cows that once roamed these grasslands like lazy tanks. Some ancient herder probably wept over this one. Maybe it was their strongest animal. Maybe it got stuck in the mud during the final rains. Or maybe it just wandered too far and collapsed. Either way, it rests here now, half buried and sun-bleached like a warning or a lullaby. And then footsteps. Not yours. A man approaches, draped in pale cloth that whips around him like sails. His face is mostly hidden, but he nods in greeting. He offers you a dried fig and points ahead, saying a word you don't know but that feels like, come. You follow him, and after some time, you reach a strange gathering. A festival? A trade meet? Something in between. Dozens of nomadic groups have gathered around a tiny spring, the last reliable source of water for miles. They've arrived with goats, beads, strange drums, and bundles of herbs. There's music playing slow, rhythmic, like the heartbeat of a tired planet. Children dance, elders barter. A woman balances a pot on her head that's at least twice the size of your own skull. And food. Oh, the food. Roasted roots. Salted fish. How on earth did they get fish out here? Smoked meat. You taste something spicy and sweet that nearly makes you cry. One man laughs at your expression and pats you on the back. You've just eaten fermented tamarind mixed with camel milk. You're not sure how to feel about it. Here in this dusty convergence, cultures are colliding gently. Not with conquest, but with curiosity. A boy from one group teaches a girl from another how to play a reed flute. An old woman braids a stranger's hair in a style you've never seen. Someone begins telling a story slow, measured, sung more than spoken. You don't understand the language, but the rhythm pulls you in. It's the story of the rain god who once lived in the mountain. He cried tears that filled the lakes, they say. But one day, he lost his favorite animal, a white ibisand. His grief dried up. Since then, the rains have come only in dreams. You glance around. No one laughs at this. They nod solemnly. This is not just myth, it's memory wrapped in metaphor. Historians still argue whether these oral traditions are reliable history or comforting fiction, but that misses the point. Whether factual or not, these stories kept people sane. They offered shape to chaos. And in the ever-drying Sahara, that mattered more than dates or dynasties. Night falls again, and the festival begins to wind down. People retreat into tents or simply stretch out on mats beneath the stars. You find yourself lying next to an elderly man who hums softly, watching the sky. After a while, he mutters something and points to a constellation. You recognize it, Orion. Same stars, but he calls it the camel driver. In his version, the 3 stars of the belt aren't a weapon, they're water skins slung across his shoulders. Even the sky is different here. Reimagined, retold. You drift to sleep under those stars, the echo of drums still in your ears, the taste of strange milk lingering on your tongue. Tomorrow, the people will pack up again. They'll head north, south, east searching for the next waterhole, the next place to remember what the Sahara used to be. You, too, will move on. But this place, this moment, it lodges somewhere in your memory like sand in your shoe. A gentle reminder that people didn't just survive the dying of the Green Sahara, they danced through it. Dawn breaks with a pearly haze, and the spring is already a bustle of movement. You rise quietly, watching as tents are folded, goats herded, bundles packed onto donkeys. The ground where the gathering took place will be empty by midday, like a mirage evaporated. You set off again, your feet crunching lightly over gravel and sand. The warmth is gentle now, but it won't last. The sun is starting to grow more aggressive, like a spotlight searching for the last traces of green. You start to notice the land changing yet again. Where before there were hints of trees or grass, now there are only low, crumbling hills, rocky outcrops, red dust. This is where the Sahara starts becoming the Sahara you know from modern maps. Dry, immense, and largely indifferent to your presence. But even here, in this arid silence, there are clues, little fossils pressed into rock like forgotten doodles. A snail shell, spiraled and stubborn. A fishbone. A leaf's imprint, preserved so delicately you'd think it was sketched there yesterday. These are the whispers of the African humid period, as scientists call it. For about 10 years, roughly from 11 to 5 years ago, the Sahara was a verdant paradise. Forests in some parts, open savannas in others, rivers crossed it, lakes glittered across its surface. Monsoon rains came regularly, pulled farther north by slight but significant changes in Earth's orbit. Climate cycles, slow and subtle, like the Earth adjusting its posture in sleep. You bend down to brush dust from a stone and wonder, what did this place smell like back then? Petrichor after a rainstorm? Damp roots? Wildflowers? All you smell now is dust, sun, and your own slow sweat. The people who lived here adapted in remarkable ways. In the north, along what is now Libya and Algeria, groups we'd call Proto-Berbers carved intricate images into rock petroglyphs of elephants, giraffes, rhinos, and even swimming people. These aren't casual stick figures. Some are elaborate, layered, and precise. One giraffe carving stretches over 20 feet long. It's as if someone decided that art wasn't a side project, it was how you told the world you existed. Historians still argue whether these carvings were spiritual or simply documentary. Were they maps, hunting instructions, religious symbols, or just ancient graffiti, the kind someone's uncle might have etched during a particularly boring week? And then there are the cattle cults. Yes, you heard right. As the Green Sahara began to fade slowly, like a candle running out of wick, cattle became not just food but identity. Entire cultures revolved around them. In some areas, people were buried alongside their most prized cattle, horns carefully arranged as if to guide them into the afterlife. And in one astonishing example, the site of Nabta Playa, deep in what is now southern Egypt's ancient peoples, went even further. You arrive there late in the day. The heat is brutal, the kind that slows your thoughts and makes your teeth feel warm. But the sight is worth it. Stones, big ones, arranged in careful circles and alignments. They don't look like much at first, just weathered rocks, some barely up to your knee. But then you realize these were aligned with the stars. astronomically precise. And they were built around 60 to 70 years ago, at least 1,000 years before Stonehenge. Let that sink in. A star calendar in the middle of a prehistoric savanna, historians still debate how it was used. Was it ceremonial, agricultural? Was it just a really elaborate calendar for birthday reminders? The truth is, we don't know. But it tells us that the people here were watching the skies with intent, not just for rain, but for meaning. You touch one of the stones, it's warm, almost soft from erosion, and then you think about the people who placed it, how many hands it took, how many days they labored under a gentler sun. Did they argue over placement? Was there a leader, a priest, a teenage apprentice who dropped one and got scolded? This moment in time, this humid period, wasn't just an oasis in the desert's history. It was a full chapter, a way of life that persisted for thousands of years. Cultures rose, traded, migrated. People adapted, innovated, created stories and songs and sciences of their own. The Sahara wasn't an empty stage waiting for empires. It was the show. And slowly, heartbreakingly, it began to vanish. The monsoons shifted south again. Earth's axis tilted just enough, over just enough time, to pull the rain away. What had taken thousands of years to build a web of lakes, rivers, forests took only centuries to unravel. Not all at once, mind you. The drying happened in stages. Some lakes lingered longer than others. Some people held on, clinging to shrinking springs and changing their diet from fish to roots to, eventually, dust. You pass by a dry basin that once held Lake Megachad. Yes, that was its name, Lake Megachad. Possibly the largest freshwater lake Earth has ever seen. At its peak, it was bigger than all the Great Lakes of North America combined. A literal inland sea, teeming with fish and hippos and canoe-borne travelers. Now, a plain of cracked earth and distant mirages. It's still technically a lake in some seasons, but barely, a shadow of its former glory. You sit on a rock near what might have been its shoreline and imagine boats gliding across the surface, songs echoing over the waves, children splashing near the reeds, crocodiles watching silently from under lily pads. That world feels unreal, dreamlike, and yet the evidence is all around you. You lean back and stare at the sky. No clouds, just blue, clear, eternal. And you wonder not for the first time what it would be like if the rains returned. Could they? Would they? There are those who think it's possible, that someday, thanks to Earth's natural cycles, the Sahara will be green again. It's happened before, they say. It could happen again. But tonight, it's just you and the stones, in the quiet, in the knowledge that underneath your feet the Sahara still remembers. You rise before dawn, the sky still a bruised blue, just starting to soften around the edges. There's a strange stillness to this moment, like the desert is holding its breath. You set off once more, your shadow long behind you, and as you walk, you start to notice something rocks scattered in strange ways, clusters of blackened flint, shards of pottery sticking up from the sand like fossilized flower petals. You're walking through what used to be a settlement. There are no standing buildings, of course ain't no walls or streets, but the clues are there if you know how to read them. Tiny piles of burnt stone where fires once cooked meals, middens full of shells and bones. You step around one particularly large shard and imagine a woman holding it, maybe turning it in her hands, maybe muttering about how it's her favorite bowl and someone better not break it again. This wasn't a one-off campsite. This was a home, maybe even a village, one of hundreds that dotted the green Sahara during its humid age. And these people weren't just passing through, they were thriving. Around 80 years ago, small pastoral communities began to settle more permanently across what's now known as the Central Sahara. They raised cattle, goats, and sheep. They grew millet and barley. They fished in nearby lakes and sometimes paddled out on reed boats. Imagine, just for a moment, navigating the desert by canoe. It's not a fever dream, it's ancient reality. Historians still argue whether these communities developed agriculture independently or if they adopted it from neighbors to the east. Either way, it spread like sunlight fast, warm, and life-altering. You crouch by a scatter of obsidian blazed glass sharp, even now, imported from hundreds of kilometers away. That's right, trade routes. Long before camels trudged across dunes in golden caravans, humans were swapping obsidian, seashells, and gossip across vast, green plains. And it wasn't all work. These were people, after all. They played music flutes carved from bone. They wore jewelry beads made from ostrich eggshells, carved stones, and, occasionally, imported turquoise. You find yourself smiling at that. Someone crossing what we now call inhospitable wasteland just to acquire jewelry. Some things never change. The early Saharan people also left behind tombs, sometimes simple pits, sometimes stone-covered graves, as elaborate as anything in Neolithic Europe. At the site of Gobero in modern-day Niger, archaeologists found a cemetery of over 200 individuals. Some were buried with grave goods, pottery, tools, even flowers. One grave held a woman and 2 children, all 3 arranged with tenderness, their arms linked in a pose that's either heartbreaking or heart-mending, depending on how you feel about the passage of time. What's fascinating is that these people weren't all the same group. Gobero, for instance, shows evidence of at least 2 distinct populations, living there one tall and lean, the other shorter and stockier, separated by a few thousand years. It's as if the land called to people again and again, despite the creeping drought. You pause to sip water and scan the horizon. Somewhere out there, under your feet, is more of this whole society's buried by sand, patiently waiting to be rediscovered. One of the more curious details you come across next is a set of carvings, not the big dramatic giraffes or crocodiles this time, but smaller figures, people, and they're doing something unexpected. They're swimming. Yes, swimming. In a cave known today as the Cave of Swimmers in the Gilf Kebir Plateau of southwest Egypt, there are wall paintings dated to around 80 years ago. They depict humans with outstretched limbs, floating serenely through what must have been a body of water. No one paints people swimming in the middle of a desert for no reason. These weren't symbolic. They were snapshots, postcards from a greener time. Historians still debate what these swimmers mean. Were they actual depictions of daily life, ritual scenes, dream symbols? But here's what we do know. That cave is now 400 miles from the nearest permanent water source. Let that sink in. The artists of the Green Sahara were painting their world as it was a world with enough water to swim in. And then, as you walk deeper into this idea, you start noticing the silence growing louder. The lakes began to shrink. The grass thinned. Herds moved south, following the rain. People didn't abandon their homes all at once. They clung, adapted, reinvented. Some began digging wells. Others tried new crops. Many simply packed up and migrated south into the Sahel, east into the Nile Valley, or west toward the Atlantic coast. This exodus wasn't chaotic. It was slow, mournful, methodical, like packing up the summer home when you know autumn isn't going to end. You crest a rise and see it. What once was Lake Fezzan, now just a series of salt flats and dry channels in southern Libya. But here too are clues fragments of canoes, fish hooks, and small statues carved from wood, preserved in silt. The kind of artifacts that whisper of entire days' children playing near the shore, fishermen hauling in lines, someone fixing a net while humming the same tune their great-grandmother taught them. You begin to feel the weight of what was lost, not just the ecology, but the rhythm of life. The way people once oriented their days around rain and grass rather than heat and absence. Yet in this loss, there's resilience. The Sahara's ancient people didn't disappear. Their descendants adapted to new environments. They became the first Sahelian cultures, the Nubians along the Nile, the early Berber societies. Their DNA lives on not just in genetics, but in language, craft, and even place names. You reach the bottom of the slope and sit, listening to the wind. Somewhere far below, a flake of obsidian catches the light. You can almost hear them, the songs of the herders, the splash of paddles, the laughter around campfires. You're walking through a ghost forest of memory. And even though the trees are gone, their roots still hold the soil of the past. The air is cooler now as you continue wandering across this ancient landscape, the sun dipping lower behind dunes that once rolled through forests. You can almost smell the damp earth and fresh leaves, reminders of a time when the Sahara was a green wilderness, not a vast sea of sand. You find yourself thinking about the animals that once called this place home, not just the hippos and crocodiles famously known to have thrived here, but entire ecosystems full of creatures we rarely imagine in deserts. Herds of elephants roamed freely, grazing on tall grasses. Giraffes nibbled on acacia trees that stretched toward the sky. Lions prowled along the riverbanks, and waterbirds like flamingos flocked around lakes as pink as sunsets. One of the strangest facts about this now barren region is how interconnected its ecosystems were. The lakes and rivers formed a network of waterways linking the interior to the Nile and even the Mediterranean. This connectivity allows species to migrate easily, creating a rich tapestry of life. And humans? They followed these animals. They hunted, fished, and gathered plants, living in harmony with the land's rhythm. Imagine waking up to the calls of fish eagles, the rustle of reeds, and the low grunts of hippos in the Distance's soothing natural soundtrack that made the desert bloom with life. Historians still debate whether these ancient Saharan communities primarily hunted or herded their animals. Some evidence suggests that early pastoralism began as a supplement to hunting and gathering, rather than a replacement. It's as if the people were experimenting, trying out new ways of living in a changing environment, like you might test a new recipe before deciding if it's a keeper. You pause at a small patch of quartz scattered across the ground. These stones were used to make sharp tools and weapons. It's easy to forget that behind every ancient artifact lies countless hours of craftsmanship, trial and error, and, sometimes, sheer frustration. Your fingers brush over the smooth edges, and you imagine the hand that shaped it, the eyes that judged its sharpness. Now, let's talk about one of the quirkiest tidbits from this era. Evidence suggests that some Saharan people might have been among the earliest to make use of cannabis. That's right, archaeologists have found traces of the plant in some ancient sites. We still don't know if it was used medicinally, ritually, or recreationally, but it adds a fascinating layer to their daily lives. Maybe they unwound after a long day of herding cattle with a little herbal relaxant. Or perhaps it was part of a spiritual practice historians still argue whether its use was widespread or limited to certain groups. As you imagine this, you feel a gentle warmth spread in the fading light, a reminder that even in harsh environments, humans found ways to connect, heal, and celebrate life. The landscape itself tells a story of change, resilience, and adaptation. For thousands of years, the Sahara's climate shifted between wet and dry phases, influenced by the Earth's orbital cycles and atmospheric patterns. During wet periods, vast lakes and savannas flourished. During dry spells, these gave way to desert sands. This cyclical transformation wasn't sudden but a gradual unfolding, like the slow turning of a giant page in the book of time. People living through it had to constantly adapt. Some migrated to more hospitable regions, while others developed new survival strategies. One remarkable example is the rock art scattered throughout the Sahara. These ancient murals and carvings, dating back over 70 years, depict everything from daily life to mythical creatures. They're a window into how people understood their world-in artistic conversation between past and present. In the Tassili and Ager region, you find stunning images of cattle, hunters, and even scenes of dancing figures, sometimes with exaggerated, almost cartoonish features. It's easy to picture the artists laughing softly as they sketched, or the communities gathering around to share stories inspired by these images. Historians still debate the precise meanings of many of these depictions. Were they purely decorative? Did they serve religious or magical purposes? Or were they early forms of communication? The truth might be a mix of all these. Reflecting on this, you realize that the Sahara was more than just a landscape. It was a cultural hub, a cradle of creativity and connection that continues to inspire us today. As twilight deepens, you find a quiet spot to rest. The stars begin to twinkle overhead, the same stars that guided those ancient people through their migrations and nighttime journeys. It's humbling to think that despite the vast gulf of time, you're sharing a moment with countless generations who walked this same ground under these same skies. You close your eyes briefly and imagine the green Sahara in full bloom, rivers teeming with fish, hippos splashing in cool waters, and humans living intimately with their environment crafting tools, telling stories, and maybe, just maybe, sharing a smoke under the ancient moon. The sun sinks low over the desert horizon, and your thoughts wander to the period when the Sahara's climate began its slow, relentless shift from lush greenery back to the vast, arid expanse we know today. This gradual desertification didn't happen overnight. It was a process stretching thousands of years, intertwined with human adaptation and survival. You can almost feel the change-once abundant rivers shrinking to seasonal streams, grasslands giving way to bare sand, and wildlife retreating or disappearing. This environmental transformation forced the people of the Sahara to innovate, migrate, or perish. Historians still debate the exact causes and timing of the desertification, with theories ranging from natural climate cycles to human-induced changes like overgrazing. One of the more intriguing debates concerns the role of the Sahara pump theory. It suggests that as the Sahara dried, populations moved both north into the Mediterranean and south into sub-Saharan Africa, carrying with them technologies, languages, and cultural practices. This movement shaped the demographic and cultural map of Africa for millennia. You might wonder how early Saharans coped with such drastic changes. Archaeological evidence points to shifts in diet from abundant fish and waterfowl to more reliance on hardy plants and hunting terrestrial animals. Tools and pottery styles also evolved, showing adaptation to new lifestyles. Imagine learning to survive as the world around you literally turns to dust. Here's a curious tidbit. Some early Saharan communities practiced what you might call proto-pastoralism, herding cattle and other animals before fully embracing agriculture. This blending of hunter-gatherer and herding lifestyles created a unique cultural mosaic that scholars are still piecing together. As the desert expanded, so did the cultural significance of water. Oases became lifelines, centers of settlement, and nodes of trade. Towns like Gadams and Siwa flourished as green islands in the arid sea, preserving ancient knowledge and traditions. These oases were not just survival points, but places where culture and spirituality intertwined with everyday life. Speaking of spirituality, many rock art sites from this era depict enigmatic symbols and figures that some interpret as early religious or ritualistic expressions. Historians still argue whether these markings represent cosmological beliefs or social messages, but they undoubtedly reflect a deep connection between people and their changing environment. And here's a light note for the night. Why did the ancient Saharan farmer refuse to argue with the wind? Because it always blew him away. Yes, another desert joke to keep the sand at bay. By now, you're settling into the rhythm of this slow desert story, realizing that the Sahara's history is not just about sand and sun, but about resilience, transformation, and the enduring spirit of those who live through one of Earth's most dramatic environmental changes. The desert wind carries a whisper of stories older than any city, older even than the empires that rose and fell at the edges of the Sahara. As you continue your journey through time, you find yourself in the era when the Sahara was a canvas for early human culture and innovation. This is where the history of this great land blends science, art, and mystery. You probably didn't expect to find some of the world's oldest rock art here, did you? Spread across the rocky plateaus and hidden caves are vivid paintings and engravings that depict animals like giraffes, elephants, and hippos, reminders of the greener times, but also humans engaged in dancing, hunting, and rituals. These images aren't just ancient doodles. They offer a window into the lives and beliefs of the people who once called this place home. Archaeologists still debate the exact meanings of these scenes. Were they storytelling, spiritual ceremonies, or even early attempts at marking time? It's the kind of puzzle that keeps the field lively. Imagine stumbling upon a hidden gallery in the middle of nowhere, suddenly confronted with the echoes of voices from thousands of years ago. In one famous site called Tassili and Ajer in Algeria, the rock art spans thousands of years, revealing changes in environment, society, and culture. You can almost hear the laughter and the crackle of fires as the artist added new scenes through generations. Historians still argue whether these paintings were made continuously or in bursts during more prosperous, wetter times. As the climate shifted and the green Sahara dried, these early humans adapted with remarkable ingenuity. Tools, pottery, and early farming practices emerged, marking the dawn of a slow but steady transition from nomadic hunting to settled life. You might find yourself wondering what it felt like to plant your first seeds in this ancient soil, hoping for a harvest amid uncertainty. A quirky tidbit for you. Some early Saharan communities used unusual pigments made from ochre mixed with animal fat, creating a kind of prehistoric paint that was both vibrant and durable. So the next time you marvel at a colorful painting, remember those ancient artists who mixed their own paint from the earth and nature's bounty? Historians still argue about the symbolic meanings behind the colors and images, but the craftsmanship is undeniable. This section of history also introduces fascinating connections to the wider world. The Sahara wasn't a barrier so much as a bridge people, ideas, and goods crossed it, linking the African interior with the Mediterranean and beyond. Trade networks developed, bringing not just commodities like salt and gold, but cultural exchanges and new technologies. One captivating story is that of the Nok culture in what is now Nigeria, famous for its terracotta sculptures dating back over 2,000 years. While not directly in the Sahara, their existence shows the broader tapestry of African history weaving alongside the desert's evolution. It's a reminder that Africa's story is not one of isolation but of vibrant, interconnected civilizations. As you listen to this layered past, you notice how the Sahara's people have always been storytellers not just in words, but in art, trade, and survival. Their legacy continues to inspire curiosity and awe today. And here's a gentle joke to soften the scholarly edge. Why don't ancient Saharan painters ever get tired? Because they always work with brushstrokes of genius. Okay, maybe don't use that one on a date, but it's good for a bedtime chuckle. You lean back, feeling the vast expanse of history settle around you like a warm blanket, the mysteries and achievements of early Saharan cultures echoing softly into the night. As dawn's first light brushes the Sahara's endless dunes, your mind drifts to a time when great empires began to shape the edges of this vast desert, turning it into a crossroads of culture and commerce. This section takes you to the golden age of the trans-Saharan trade routes, a network of camel caravans, ancient cities, and exchanged treasures that connected sub-Saharan Africa with Mediterranean and European worlds. Imagine the clatter of camel hooves on sandy paths stretching hundreds of miles under the blazing sun. Traders transport salt slabs from the Sahara salt mines, exchanging them for gold from West African kingdoms like Ghana, Mali, and Songhai. This trade was the lifeblood of entire civilizations, fueling wealth, power, and cultural exchange. Historians still debate the exact routes and the scale of this commerce, but its impact is undisputed. One fascinating example is Timbuktu, once a bustling hub of scholarship and trade. It's not just a city of sand and dust, but a beacon of knowledge, with libraries holding thousands of manuscripts on astronomy, mathematics, law, and poetry. The idea that such a rich intellectual center flourished in the middle of the desert might surprise many, and it's a reminder that the Sahara was far from a cultural void. Here's a quirky side note. Camel caravans didn't just transport goods. They also carried stories, songs, and news. Merchants would sometimes spend months crossing the desert, sharing tales around campfires that wove a rich tapestry of oral history. It's like an ancient podcast, but with more sand and fewer Wi-Fi interruptions. Historians still argue about how much influence these stories had on regional cultures, and even beyond. In addition to gold and salt, other goods like ivory, slaves, textiles, and spices flowed through these routes, linking diverse peoples and economies. The Sahara's role as a commercial artery helped shape not just Africa's history, but also that of Europe and the Middle East. A particularly vivid story comes from the journey of Ibn Battuta, a 14th century Moroccan explorer. His travels took him deep into the Sahara, where he marveled at the resilience of desert communities and the complexity of their trade networks. His accounts, filled with vivid descriptions and sometimes humorous observations, remain some of the most detailed records of medieval Saharan life. Speaking of humor, here's a little gem. Why don't camels ever get lost in the desert? Because they always follow their hump polar navigation. Okay, that one's a bit punny, but hey, it's bedtime. As you imagine these caravans winding across the desert, you start to appreciate how the Sahara's harsh environment shaped not only survival strategies, but also human ingenuity and interconnectedness. The desert was a place of both challenge and opportunity, a vast stage for epic journeys and cultural encounters. So, next time you think of the Sahara, picture it not just as a sea of sand, but as a vibrant highway where history was written in footprints, trading goods, and the timeless exchange of stories beneath the stars. The sun has dipped below the horizon, leaving a soft, violet glow that fades into the night sky. You feel the gentle chill settling in as darkness cloaks the land, but the story isn't over far from it. Now, you venture deeper into the tale of the Sahara's transformation, a slow, mesmerizing shift from lush jungles to the arid desert we know today. What exactly caused the Sahara to dry up? It's a question that's been debated endlessly by climate scientists, archaeologists, and historians alike. The main culprit is a combination of changes in the Earth's orbit known as Milankovitch cycle sand shifts in the monsoon patterns. Over thousands of years, these factors reduced rainfall drastically. The great rivers shrank, lakes evaporated, and the green landscapes gradually gave way to sand dunes. But here's the twist. Humans might have had a role in speeding up this desertification. As communities grew and herding intensified, they could have contributed to vegetation loss through overgrazing. Historians still argue whether human activity was a minor actor or a leading cause in this environmental shift. It's like watching a slow-motion tug-of-war between nature's grand rhythms and human influence. Picture this, a small group of pastoralists moving their cattle across the shrinking grasslands, noticing fewer fresh shoots each season. Their options dwindle: move on, adapt, or risk starvation. This scenario played out countless times, forcing migrations and cultural changes that echo through history. A fascinating example comes from the story of the Garamantes, an ancient Saharan civilization that thrived in what is now Libya. They developed ingenious irrigation systems, tapping underground water to cultivate crops and sustain life in an increasingly hostile environment. Imagine the determination it took to build such complex technology amid encroaching desert sandstrew ingenuity born from necessity. Now, let's lighten the mood with a quirky fact. Some researchers propose that ancient Saharans used crocodile dung as a sunscreen. Yes, you read that right. It sounds bizarrian, probably uncomfortable, but it might have offered some protection against the relentless sun. It's a reminder that survival often requires creative, if odd, solutions. Historians still debate the prevalence of this practice, but it sure makes you reconsider the phrase ancient skincare routine. As you absorb these images, you begin to appreciate how the Sahara story is not just about climate or geography, but about resilience, adaptation, and the unyielding spirit of its people. Moving forward in time, as the desert solidified its grip, trade routes emerged across these harsh lands, linking sub-Saharan Africa with the Mediterranean. The Sahara transformed from a green wilderness to a challenging highway of camel caravans and merchant travelers. The salt, gold, and spices that traversed these routes fueled empires and stories. Consider the tale of the Tuareg, often called the Blue People, for their indigo-dyed robes that stained their skin. These nomadic desert dwellers mastered navigation across the vast, shifting sands, guided by stars and ancient knowledge passed down through generations. Their lives remind you that even in the driest places, culture and connection thrive. Historians still argue about the precise routes and interactions of these desert travelers, but their influence is undeniable. They were not merely survivors, but keepers of stories, culture, and commerce in a landscape that could easily swallow the unprepared. As night deepens, you imagine sitting beside a campfire with these desert nomads, listening to tales under a tapestry of stars. The crackling flames, the rhythmic hum of distant drums, and the whisper of the desert wind all blend into a soothing symphony. You start to realize that the Sahara's history is a long, winding narrative of transformation from lush jungles filled with hippos and elephants to the iconic desert of endless dunes, and finally, to the cultural crossroads of ancient trade and nomadic life. It's a story that invites you to slow down, listen closely, and appreciate the subtle beauty in change. You let your thoughts drift with the desert breeze, feeling a sense of calm and connection to a place both wild and deeply human. Night deepens, and the stars emerge over the desert's vast emptiness, guiding your mind toward the enduring legacies of the Sahara's early civilizations. Despite the harsh environment, remarkable cultures flourished here, leaving behind traces of their ingenuity, artistry, and adaptability. Consider the Garamantes, a mysterious people who thrived in the central Sahara around 500 BCE to 700 CE. Their story is a fascinating puzzle. They built advanced irrigation systems called fagaras, channeling underground water to sustain agriculture in the desert. This allowed them to create prosperous towns where date palms and grains grew against all odds. Historians still debate how much influence they had on neighboring regions and whether they maintained connections with the Roman Empire and sub-Saharan Africa. One quirky aspect of the Garamantes is their use of chariots, which archaeologists once thought impossible in desert terrain. But evidence shows they adapted chariot technology to navigate shifting sands, blending military tactics with desert survival, skills a testament to human creativity in unlikely places. You might picture the Garamantes as desert warriors, traders, and farmers rolled into one, living amid palm groves surrounded by sand seas. Their rock art, tombs, and artifacts speak of a society that balanced tradition with innovation. Yet, much about them remains enigmatic, wrapped in layers of sand and time. A compelling real-life example comes from recent archaeological discoveries revealing ancient graffiti petroglyphs etched on stones showing scenes of daily life, animals, and even dancing figures. These images suggest a vibrant culture with social and spiritual dimensions beyond mere survival. It's like finding a forgotten diary carved in stone. Meanwhile, further north, the ancient Egyptians looked to the Sahara as both a barrier and a resource. Their desert expeditions brought precious minerals and exotic animals back to the Nile Valley. They also imbued the desert with spiritual meaning, seeing it as a place of both danger and divine presence. Historians still argue about how much the desert shaped Egyptian mythology and identity. For a touch of humor, why don't desert archaeologists ever get bored? Because every grain of sand has a story to tell. And yes, their jokes might be a bit dry. As you reflect on these civilizations, you start to see the Sahara not as an empty wasteland, but as a stage where cultures rose and fell, each leaving its unique mark. It's a history of endurance, adaptation, and surprising brilliancy, a reminder that even the harshest places can foster human creativity and connection. The night's hush deepens as you settle in, and the vastness of the Sahara begins to feel less like emptiness and more like a profound tapestry woven through millennia. This final stretch draws you to the modern echoes of the Sahara's ancient past, tracing how today's people live with, adapt to, and honor this remarkable landscape. You imagine yourself walking through the bustling markets of Timbuktu or the peaceful palm groves of Siwa, where traditions stretch back thousands of years. The Sahara isn't just history frozen in sand, it's a living, breathing place where nomads, farmers, and traders still navigate a challenging environment with grace and wisdom. One of the most fascinating aspects of modern Saharan life is the persistence of traditional knowledge, how communities use age-old techniques for finding water, predicting weather, and managing scarce resources. Despite modern pressures like climate change and political instability, these practices survive, reminding us of human resilience. A real-life story that sticks out is that of the Tuareg people, often called the Blue Men of the Desert because of their distinctive indigo clothing. They've been nomadic for centuries, expertly navigating the desert's shifting dunes and harsh sun. Their oral poetry and music carry the Sahara's history, blending melancholy and joy in songs that echo the vastness around them. Historians still debate how nomadic lifestyles will adapt in the coming decades as environmental challenges and globalization bring change. But one thing is clear, the Sahara's human story continues, evolving but rooted in the deep past you've journeyed through tonight. Here's a gentle joke for the road. Why did the desert nomad bring a ladder? To reach new height 7 if it was just a sand dune. Sometimes the simplest humor is the best for sleepy ears. As you let the final thoughts settle, you realize the Sahara story is one of transformation, survival, and surprising beauty. It's a tale that reminds you how even the most barren places teem with life, history, and endless wonder. Now, take a deep breath. Feel the calm spread as the desert winds whisper their ancient lullabies. Let your mind drift gently with the sand, and may your dreams carry you across the green Sahara that once was.